Cool, thanks dudes. Yes, we're in America, it's E3 and nothing America likes more than open wheel racing. So I'm delighted to be joined by the Codemasters dudes here. Steve Hood, Creative Director, and Andy, who's going to be playing here as well.
Hey.
How you doing, guys?
Pretty good.
So, Formula 1, 2010 you guys came out with the franchise that hadn't been seen in quite a while. 2011 then you guys made a lot of vast improvements to the game and changed it up a lot on a sort of a fundamental level. So coming into the sort of difficult third album, what's your guys' focus this time around?
Well, really for us it's about kind of combining all the things that we had over the past few years. I mean, 2010 was a massive success for Codemasters. A lot of people were involved in that game. It was a bit of a gamble with us. It's a big title for the company to launch, but it went incredibly well. Moving on to 2011, the deal for us was trying to refine the things that we've been doing, and 2012 is what we're hoping for, is that breakthrough title where it really goes global. Cool. I mean, Formula 1's coming back to the States in terms of the Circuit of Americas.
Actually, I think, yeah.
Should I switch to this? How's that?
Got me now?
Yeah, there you go.
So the 2010 title was a massive success. 2011 was about refining it, and 12 is about going global. So the important thing for us is really trying to match the intense kind of scrutiny that we're going to have this year with the Circuit of Americas. So Formula 1 comes back to the States. We're trying to make more of an accessible title this year, and that doesn't mean before people think that we're dumbing it down. That's not going to be that case at all. I think we've already got the kind of sim guys on board with the kind of things that we're doing on console. You can tweak things like brake bias, you can change your fuel load, all those kind of things that people would normally avoid doing for a console game. So I think we've got the balance right now in terms of trying to go for that premium feel. Formula 1 is a massive, massive sport, and I think Codemasters are really doing justice to it now.
Just let's focus on what's going on with the gameplay here. Of course, you guys have the Circuit of the Americas here, which is a new circuit on the season this year.
Yeah, absolutely amazing track, actually. You're always worried that when a new track comes into the calendar that it won't be that much fun. I mean, we're always hoping that Circuit of the Americas was going to be awesome. It's turned out to be really, really good fun.
Does it even look like this yet? Because they're still building it.
No, if you actually Google it now, it doesn't quite look like that, so I'm pretty sure that they're hoping it will do. I mean, it's accurate in terms of the track layout, the height map data, all these kind of technical information that people would demand from a Formula 1 game anyhow.
What was that like, trying to essentially work with the designers of that track to try and get a really sort of high fidelity track, considering it may look slightly different when it's finished?
I mean,
at least aesthetically, I know.
You might notice a few trees in the background that might not be there when they actually finish off. They'll be in the early days of infancy in terms of growing. But in terms of all the buildings and the plans for the circuit, we have all that info. And we've been through this before. I mean, we've built the likes of Korea off plans. And actually, we were quite interested to see what happened on the first race when the drivers actually took to the track in Korea to see whether or not we would be accurate. And thank God we were. It turned out to be perfect. And some drivers are actually saying that they were using our title in order to become familiar with the game before it came out. Some of the smaller teams that don't have their own dedicated simulators. So we've got our expert driver, as you can see here.
We've opened the DRS going around the corner there or something.
Yeah, it's a noob mistake, that one, I'm afraid.
So mechanically, I guess, this time around, visually it looks quite similar to last year's game. So the difference with these games, I guess, is that when I remember playing F1 2011 last year for the first time, it felt like almost like a completely different driving engine. The ability to understeer and oversteer, and just the cornering a lot of the time felt incredibly different. You felt more dangerous, but felt that if you played it properly, you were more in control as well. So when people pick up this game for the first time, what's the difference they're going to feel from last year's title?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it perfectly in terms of what we were trying to do with 11 last year was make a more involving game. But I think sometimes to the detriment of stability. I mean, when you see a Formula 1 car going through high-speed turns, they look so kind of planted onto the ground. The downforce is pushing the car into the ground. So what we wanted in the 2012 game was to feel as though the car was committed to a corner when you really attack it.
Yeah.
But what you want in the low-speed stuff is that kind of manoeuvrability, kind of the car slides as the tyres get old. You want some fun with the car coming out of corners. You want to lock up going into corners. That's where you can lose your time, but it's also exciting. And I think 12 has that kind of perfect balance between what you had in 10 and what we were trying to attain in 11, so I'm really pleased with it.
Cool. Just to remind folks, of course, anyone watching the live stream, you can ask questions by filling in the form underneath the video on GameSpot.com, or say it on the Twitch TV channel I'll pick up there, or tweet us with hashtag GameSpotE3, and I'll do my best to ask the guys questions you have for Formula 1 2012. So in terms of the campaign, I guess, the sort of season mode, the first game you guys focused on, I guess, being the driver and having the truck and doing things like talking to press and whatnot. Is there a change up in that respect? Are you adding to that formula?
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to improve the career mode, and that's one of the big reveals that we have probably in a few weeks' time. We're keeping some of those things secret at E3, but I mean, it's no secret that we always want to improve the career mode. And one of the things that we're trying to do this year, not to touch on the big reveal, is really trying to make you feel as though you're part of an F1 season. Anybody that watches any kind of motorsport realizes that if it plays out over a number of races, it naturally builds a story throughout the year. You know, certain rivalries, teams having trouble with their cars. This year it's some teams having trouble with the tyres or making them last. And that all adds to the sense of you're going through a career, and that's what we're trying to follow with F1 2012. So as you go throughout your career season, you'll see news reports, you get press clippings, you get information on which teams are doing well with their tyres, which teams are struggling. So you feel part of the bigger picture, if you like. So it feels like a true F1 season. And at the start of the season, actually, one of the big features that we are including this year is something that's actually in the real world of Formula One. It's called the F1 drivers test, the young drivers test, which happens traditionally towards the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, where drivers from other series, let's say GP2, a few rungs below Formula One, get an opportunity to try a Formula One car for the first time. And teams use this as a way of sounding out future talent. Is this young kid going to make it in Formula One? Could he be what we're looking for? They try out new parts. So we're taking that concept to basically put it at the start of the game. It's part of the introduction sequence. It merges through into the career mode, and it's basically our way of teaching the novice player, perhaps the guy that doesn't know much about the sport and Formula One, how to drive a Formula One car. What are the basics? Then day 2 goes into a bit more information on, you know, DRS curves, the different tyres that are available in Formula One. Because I think for the outsider, Formula One come across as quite complex.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we like to think of it as quite rich. It really differentiates itself from other sports, because for gamers, it's not too difficult, I don't think, to understand things like DRS, which is changing the rear wing so you can use it for overtaking, but in practice,
like a push button, essentially.
Yeah, it's like
in a way.
It's like a push the button in terms of it gives you less downforce, but it makes it go faster in a straight line. And then you've got KERS, which is basically 80 brake horsepower worth of battery power that's been harvested during your previous lap that you can use throughout the lap in order to kind of boost a bit more power into the car, increase your top speed, increase acceleration. And they are quite easy concepts for gamers to pick up. People were worried when they were first introduced to the sport of Formula One that maybe it becomes too complex a thing for gamers, but we love all that kind of stuff. They're toys to play with on the car, if you like.
I was introduced to Formula One by a friend of mine who would watch the season, and then when the game came out, the two of us just sort of playing it together, and I sort of learned how the sport worked from playing the first game that you guys made on this new franchise. One of the interesting things I find is that when you look at a game like FIFA, for instance, it's another kind of sport-based game. They get to tackle it from the perspective of television, from the sort of the production, the how you watch it. It's a bit more difficult to do that with F1. Were you ever inclined to go down that route to try and do it from a spectator perspective rather than being the person? I guess it makes more sense perhaps to do it this way when you're talking about one person as opposed to a team. But have you guys ever thought about that, or maybe adding elements of the television production into the...
Yeah, I think certainly when we started out in the first title, it was all about be the driver. And that simplifies things for us in terms of gameplay dramatically, because you don't need to massively worry about being the engineer in the team as well, where you're setting the car up. The car's set up for you when you go to a circuit. You can make tweaks if you want, but drivers don't go there, do a few laps, get out of the car in the garage and start tinkering with themselves. But most games take that approach. So when we were simplifying things like that, it actually makes it more realistic at the same time. You're focused on being the driver, if you like. I think this year we certainly are taking a more cinematic or broadcast-like approach in terms of maybe the replays that you see running here now. We're trying to match up to more realistic camera angles so that you can really relive your moments of glory, be it in time trial that we're showing now around the Circuit of Americas, or in the race start. So the onboards that you kind of see from the real world of Formula One, it really brings that kind of authentic level to Formula One now.
This year has been pretty unpredictable. We've had 5 races and 5 different winners. How do you guys try and script a game that's going to come out mid-season that has accurate personalities?
To be honest, it's not too difficult for us. I think it certainly makes it more interesting for viewers and gamers alike, but what we've ended up doing is matching the kind of performance of the teams to be a lot closer now. Each of the teams inherently have their own disadvantage and advantage, and that makes it interesting for the gamer when they're playing on career with 2012 performance sets, so that if you're watching TV, what we basically want is for you to understand which teams are stronger at which tracks, which cars have an advantage in terms of tyre life or the ability to qualify or their top speeds or how good their DRS their system is, basically the effectiveness of these things. And we tried to translate that into the game so that you've got a good starting point for the 2012 season when you first launch your career. It makes it pretty decent for multiplayer as well, because what I want people to be doing is not so much to be choosing to play as equal cars in multiplayer, but I like the idea of them wanting to play as with the 2012 performance. So if you're in a McLaren and I'm in a Mercedes, we're fairly evenly matched, but I might have one advantage that you don't have and you have one over me. And we basically play it out in multiplayer games so that you have an objective system that takes into account the ability of your car and gives you an objective. What we've always tried to do that in single player so that you feel like you can overachieve. In multiplayer, it shouldn't always be about, in my mind, coming first all the time. It's about doing the best possible job with the car that's available. And if you overachieve, then you're a hero.
There's something difficult about multiplayer in a game where inherently you want people to follow very strict rules and take it seriously, because there's oftentimes, when I play with mates, we have a great time, but oftentimes, and it's, I guess, from a design standpoint, hard to stop people doing it. People just it's as if they're playing Mario Kart. They just go and try and crash into somebody. I remember last year you guys introduced some sort of, I think it was like collision tricks to stop people from taking guys out. Like, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, some games try to ignore it completely and just let players arbitrate amongst themselves, but I don't really think they tend to arbitrate. They just argue, send messages to one another. What we want is
friendly
to try
messages.
Very friendly. As a good race by you, old chap. What we're trying to do is take another step in terms of trying to round off the edges of those scenarios. But it's a very, very tricky balance, because the more that you try to do, the more loopholes that you're really going to be presenting to players that you need to try and close down. And I think it would be remiss of me to try and explain all the cool things that we're trying to do, because people will try and work around it. But we've been working on a penalty system because we do take on board the feedback that people give us. We're trying to generate an environment whereby players are going to play fairly against one another in the true spirit of Formula One. But what we tend to find is that's when groups of friends go online to play in their own league or their own private races. And there's been some fantastic ones that guys at Codemasters have been involved in with a few forums recently. Really, really good racing, really good fun. But when you've got randoms online, then it's always going to be unpredictable.
Just the internet.
Yeah, and in racing games, it's always tricky. In a shooter, then you can try and avoid them, but in an F1 game or with the kind of speed that's on tap here, it's tricky.
So this season, again, we've seen often drivers losing out penalty-wise because of things that are sort of out of their control. So how do you guys balance things like having, pit stop mishaps happen in a game against not trying to punish the player for things that are out of their control? How do you add in those unforeseen consequences and circumstances that can happen in a real Formula 1 season?
Yeah, I think we do try to add those things. So you could have faults that go wrong with the car, you can have mistakes that happen in the pit lane, but we tend to try and keep those as player related as possible. So if you're hammering your car, then I don't think it's unfair to kind of promote something that could go wrong with the vehicle as a result of that. But if it's completely random, we try to steer away from that. The pits, there is a variation, not so much in the errors anymore, but there's a variation in the ability of the teams to work on the car and change the tyres in time. So, for example, a very kind of top-tier team would be routinely very quick. A lower-tier team may take a lot longer or be a little more unpredictable. So we try to make it player-based, really, so it's not too unfair. And
like in the previous games, when you start out at a low team, it's almost like you aren't trying to win races, you're just trying to garner attention from higher teams and move yourself as a career higher up the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, we have always had the ability to start in a lower team and then work your way up through the ranks to get to the team that you really want to drive for. But one of the things we've always tried to promote is, as well, if you stay with a team and you're willing to work with that team and you can get good results with them, then through R&D, then the team basically improves over the course of a season, over the course of your career. So it's fair to say that some people have got their own favourite teams that might not be winning races, but you want to drive for them, you want to make them a success, and that's something that you can always do in the game. We're trying to basically reflect the things that people can see happening on TV. I mean, Williams recently, this season, have come back and they've won a race. Last season, it was the worst possible season that they could have imagined having, but they've turned it around, and we want the same thing for the player as well, so that you can promote your favourite team. Another thing that we're trying to do really with this game is, we've always tried to do with the Formula 1 series, is play on the importance of weather. So in 2010 and 2011, we had a pretty good weather system. I mean, it looked amazing, which is always key in a gamer's eye.
The rain in Monaco is just one of those. I remember when you guys first started showing videos of it. I remember YouTubing just that 720. Some guys on like their PC rigs doing like with the high-end graphics showing the entire thing off. It just looks incredible.
Yeah, it looks incredible. And I think during development, some people were worried that it looked too realistic in the sense of it becomes very hard. But man, does it look cool.
Yeah.
So it stayed in. It's been a really generally positive response to that. But we didn't want to kind of sit back and just leave it at that and just wrap that into 2012. Some of the guys in the office have been working incredibly hard on that. And I'm pleased to say in 2012, we finally got something that we're labeling active track technology, or to summarize it, localized weather. So the great example I always use is if you're driving around Spa in Belgium, which is a huge track and known for unpredictable weather.
Big crashes too.
Big crashes, always a highlight of the season. You can basically drive through Sector 1, which could be raining, and then you go through Sector 2 and it could be dry there. So then that's where the tyre gamble comes in. Previously in our 2010-2011 title, I think if the weather was changing, there was a right time for everybody to change to the same type of tyre.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much kind of unpredictability into it. But with this localized weather system, that really kind of promotes the underlying tech that we've got in the game now, is pretty awesome.
And I guess it reflects the sort of what's happened this season a lot, where tyre choices have become so important. Thanks so much, guys, for bringing around to show the game. I can't wait to play it myself. When are people likely to be able to get it, and on what platforms?
So it's coming out for late September. Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and PC.
No Wii U?
No Wii U
no
currently.
No, currently, fair enough.